Welcome back, everyone. I'm Yvonne Davis, and I am doing political tarot astrology. So I'm talking about the midterms because we're all very excited. They're only 3 weeks away, and it is going to bring some major shifts. And as I said in my last video, I've done 3 videos now on the midterms, but I've been doing them for several months now. Now I'm really focused on the changes that are coming. But I'm going to make clear again that I'm not predicting that there will or will not be a blue wave. I'm not predicting that there will or will not be a change in the House or Senate. And the reason why I'm not predicting that specifically is because Uranus is playing a significant role. Uranus is the planet of unpredictability. It will do the exact opposite of what we expect, which is why things turned out the way they did in the presidential election, because there was this really strong Uranus influence during that election, and so it really turned things upside down. It kind of felt chaotic. It turned out to be very unpredictable, what no one expected. And so rather than even trying to pin it down, because Uranus is such a trickster, what I'd rather focus on is our karma, our national karma. And so I'm looking at charts for the US constitutional signing. I'm looking at charts for what's happening on election day. And we'll also look at Donald Trump's chart since he is the president. Obviously, what happens with him is very intimately tied with what happens to the nation. So, so that's what I'm doing here now. And I wanted to share with you something that came up. I had intended to do a series of readings leading up to the midterm so that we can start to work on our own evolution around this karma. But something came up, which is that someone suggested I look at the progressed chart for the US constitutional signing. And I know a lot of you aren't going to understand what the term progressed means, but let me just say astrologers use progressed charts to make predictions. So even if you don't understand the mathematics behind it, just understand it's a typical way that astrologers make predictions. And so anyway, I looked at that and I realized I had seen something that in astrology we call the rule of 3, which means that if you see something 3 times, then you can trust that it's an accurate prediction. And the reason for that is a couple of things. One is that, astrologers are fallible. So sometimes we may see something and it's there's a distortion going on, such as like there might be a trickster planet like Uranus, and so we actually end up playing out the role that Uranus wants us to play by getting people to think certain things, and then it turned out to be the opposite. And so Uranus was already at work there. And so I don't want to fall into that kind of trap that Uranus sets for us, where we get attached to a certain outcome and then we don't get what we wanted, and then everything feels chaotic for us and we feel like the rug was pulled out from under us. So rather than getting us attached to a specific outcome, I am just going to read the charts straight, let you make your own, conclusions, and mostly talk about what is the karma in these charts. So since I saw the rule of 3 at play, I'm going to give you readings for 3 different charts that all point to the same thing. But I'm going to do it in a 3-part series because there's so much information to share with you, and I want to try to keep each of these videos short if possible. So there will end up being 3 different videos, and basically they'll triangulate. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that first one. All right, so this is Donald Trump's chart, his natal chart on the inside, which I know you've seen many, many times if you've been watching my videos or other astrologers' videos, and so you're familiar with that. On the outside right now, this is what the alignments look like when the polls close on Election Day, November 6th. And I had originally done the chart for 7 p.m. in Los Angeles because that's when the polls close on the West Coast. But then I thought, well, Donald Trump isn't going to be on the West Coast, most likely. He's probably going to be on the East Coast. So I reset the chart for 10 p.m. on the East Coast because that's what time it will be when the polls close on the West Coast. So this chart is set for 10 p.m. in Washington, D.C. on Election Day, okay? So let me show you what we have going on here. And if you've been watching my other midterm videos, then you will recognize a lot of this. But some of it may even seem repetitive, but I need to show you this because I don't know where people are starting. Some people, this might be their first video. Okay, so on Election Day, I was showing you the opposition of Jupiter and Juno, okay? And on the chart in the U.S. Constitution signing, it's right over the midheaven of the U.S. Constitution. Well, check this out. That opposition is right over Donald Trump's midheaven. So that's, again, goes back to this idea of the rule of three. Now we see the same thing twice. But there are some other things, and it's all stacking up. Okay, so I also showed you Venus and Ceres and the moon, were opposite Uranus. Uranus is at the top of the chart. That's why Uranus is playing such an important role. When it's opposite all these planets with feminine energy, what that tells us is, one, that women are going to play an important role. Two, Uranus is all about revolution, bringing tremendous change, and it's going to have something to do with women, okay? So the other interesting thing on Election Day is that Uranus will make an exact square to the nodes. And I showed you in the other video how the moon is also making an exact opposition when the polls open in the morning. So a lot of astrological activity is happening during that day. So it starts with the Uranus opposition to these three planets in its exact opposition to the moon. As we move through the day, Uranus will make an exact opposition to the nodes, which makes it karmic. And then Uranus will change signs, which when an outer planet changes signs, that's incredibly powerful. And the nodes will change signs. That's also incredibly powerful. So these three things are happening on Election Day between 7 a.m. on the East Coast and 7 p.m. on the West Coast. That's phenomenal. That in itself says that this is going to be a kind of blow up. It's just going to turn things on its head. So if you want to know more about that, check out the other videos, and I'll put my playlist in the description box below so you can find that very easily. Okay, now so I showed you this opposition because that's very important. I showed you this opposition. That's very important because that's the issue around women and why they're angry. They're tired of the misogyny. They're tired of the abuse. So, so now let's look at this because this was the other thing that is part of what I was saying about the rule of three. The North Node changes signs on Election Day. That in itself is extremely powerful, but the fact that it happens on Election Day makes it even more powerful. And then the fact that the North Node is on the ascendant when the poles close, that gives you even more information. That says, because the ascendant is actually the most important position in the entire chart. And the midheaven is the second most important. And we see Uranus up here. So we're seeing some profound changes that are occurring. It's almost like a psychic earthquake that we will be experiencing on election day. So then you might be wondering, well, okay, what does that mean? So it's very important. It's very karmic. I get that. Well, what does that mean? This is what it means. The North Node changing signs by itself is powerful, but the fact that it's moving from Donald Trump's first house into his 12th house tells us so much more about the meaning of that shift, because the 12th house is the house of endings. It's the house of losses. It's the house of letting go, releasing, surrendering, dissolution. Remember that word, because it's going to come up in one of my other videos as I do this three-part series. It's all about letting go, things being taken away, losses, releases, surrendering. Everything's just, this is what this house is about, the 12th house. Because the nodes are interesting because they actually move backward around the zodiac. So instead of starting in the first house and moving forward, they actually go backward. So for the karma, in a sense, we actually start in the 12th house and end in the first house. So, and it's a 18-and-a-half-year journey to go all the way around. So the last time this happened for Donald Trump was approximately 18-and-a-half years ago. So if we want to do more research, we could actually look into what was going on in his life 18-and-a-half years ago. The only problem is that sometimes you may not see it in a public venue. What he went through may have been very private for him. But because he's a public persona, you might actually be able to find out what was happening, both personally and publicly for him 18-and-a-half years ago. I haven't done that research, and I'm not sure if I will, but for those of you who are interested, that can give some more information in terms of making predictions about what this means. So it's like he's starting a new cycle. And for the nodes, starting a new cycle, we start with the 12th house. We start with letting go. We start with the endings first. And the reason for that is because karmically, we need to shed the things that we know that no longer serve a purpose in our life. We need to let go of things that are no longer serving us. And I'll tell you my own opinion regarding Donald Trump. I think the number one most important karmic lesson for Donald Trump that will be playing out over the next few years has to do with his sense of reality that, as I've used in these videos before, I've used the word narcissistic. And on one hand, that's a label, but it's also shorthand to describe a lot of different behaviors, okay? It's a shorthand to describe the way his brain is shaped, the way he thinks, the way he interacts with the world. And what that means is that he's not actually capable of putting himself in someone else's shoes. He's the opposite of narcissism is empathy. So people who are highly empathetic are on the other extreme, okay? So normally we think of people who are empathetic as being something positive. But then on the other extreme, someone who's narcissistic is so self-focused, they're not capable of experiencing empathy for other people. So those are two extremes, and he's on the extreme where we would describe his behaviors and his way of thinking and interacting with the world as narcissistic. So, and I'm not even trying to be mean. I want to make that very clear. Like, as I've said before, that we can talk about behaviors and we can talk about what we value, because I personally value empathy and I value shared reality and I value honesty and truth and authenticity and all of those things, transparency, and we would love to see those kinds of things in our government. And what's most interesting to me about Trump's presidency is it's like the story of the emperor's new clothes, because this stuff's been going on for a long, long time. I even heard a snippet of his interview on 60 Minutes, and he said he talked about how he'd never seen so much deceit and lying and deception as he has discovered in Washington, D.C. But the irony is that that's his projection, and I'm not saying it's not true. I think he's actually telling the truth, that there is a phenomenal amount of lying and deceit and deception that goes on in Washington, D.C. But it's like the emperor's new clothes, because people, like, they knew deep down inside that that was true, but you could never actually prove it, And now with Donald Trump, it's like it's all out in the open. It's like lying every day, lying in the same day, and even in this, almost in the same sentence. He can say one thing and immediately after it say the opposite, and he doesn't see the contradiction. That's a symptom of pathological liar. So I want to make it clear that even though I'm using these terms, I'm not implying that I know a lot of people think he's evil, and if I say, be compassionate, we don't need to see someone as evil, we don't need to feel hate, and then I'll get comments on my board saying, don't make excuses for him. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm saying very clearly, there's narcissistic behavior, there's pathological lying. These are a problem, not just for Donald Trump, but in our government. This is a problem, okay? And the reason it's like the emperor's no clothes is because now we're seeing it. It's like all out in the open. It's all naked now. We can see it for what it is now, okay? And that's a good thing. So, okay, so here's the thing. When I look at this with the North Node in his 12th house of endings, losses, and it's also, ironically, it's a house of secrets, the things that are hidden, but it's also, ironically, the house of secrets being revealed. So, so as we release things, sometimes the things we have to release is the deception, the cloaking of the truth, and the cloak gets removed. So this is going to be an incredible year and a half, because the North Node will pass through this house. It'll take a year and a half, so it's going to be an incredible year and a half. But he needs to release that. That's part of his karma. It's part of his karma as a person and as the President of the United States, and it's part of our karma as citizens of the United States. So that's what I believe is specifically going to unfold with the North Node in his 12th house, is that he will have, over the course of that year and a half, he will have to somehow face the reality that he has been lying, and that lying is not acceptable. And it's just not acceptable on any level. And particularly for our leaders, we need to get some honesty in our leaders. And so we can thank him, for showing us the emperor's new clothes, showing us that he's, this is actually all naked. It's all out in the open now. And we can talk about it honestly now, that there's a lot of lying and deception and deceit that goes on in our government. So thank you, Donald Trump, for showing us that. So we can see it. It's right out in the open now. So that's going to be the story that's going to unfold over the next year and a half. And there's more specifics to that. Just really quickly, one of them has to do with Saturn squaring his Neptune, because his Neptune is in the 3rd house of communication, and Neptune is all about deceit, deception, delusion. It loves to create illusion, and sometimes, it can go overboard into the shadow side where it's toxic. And that's been the problem with Donald Trump, is he's living in a Neptune kind of reality, and he's communicating a Neptune kind of reality, which is illusion, but it's become toxic to the point where it's just flat out lying. It's deceit, it's deception, it's delusion, and it's not healthy. And we need to take an honest look at that. So the Saturn squaring that will help with that. And I showed you that in one of the other charts about Donald Trump. Saturn went retrograde. Now it's going direct, so it will make the square to Neptune again. And we'll see more revelations. So, and then eventually Saturn will be opposite his Mercury, and we'll see more revelations again. Because Mercury has, in the 12th house, it has the same impact as Neptune in the 3rd house. Because Mercury is the ruler of the 3rd house. Mercury is the ruler of communication and thinking. So it's in the 12th house of deceit, deception, things that are hidden, because Neptune rules the 12th house. So, so that's the way he thinks, that's the way he communicates. It's all about deceit and deception. And apparently, if you read his book, Art of the Deal, he's right out in the open about that. He admits it. He absolutely admits it right in his book. So, and that's what he's been doing. And a lot of us are not appreciating it at all. And so Saturn's going to bring that down to Earth and bring it down into hard, cold reality, because that's what Saturn does. So that's the story that's unfolding, and it's going to be pretty exciting. I wanted to share with you one more thing, which is a book that I have been reading. I just finished it. It's called Russian Roulette. I'm going to bring that up on the screen here. So, okay, Russian Roulette. Just finished that, but I want to show you so you can see that for yourself. This book, Russian Roulette, The Inside Story of Putin's War on America and the Election of Donald Trump, by Michael Isikoff and David Korn. And this is really a good book. I highly recommend it, because it's not, you know, so what we get so much of the spin, like, you know, they can take the facts. Sometimes, of course, they, you know, they can, some people can even make up facts. But even if you take the facts, you can always twist them. You can always spin them to make it look like one thing or another. What I really liked about this book was that he took the facts, but he was not spinning it. He wasn't trying to make Hillary look good. He wasn't trying to make Donald Trump look good. He wasn't trying to make Hillary look bad. He wasn't trying to make Donald look bad. He was just saying these are the facts. And I like that, because that's, you know, respecting our intelligence. Like, just give us the facts. We can draw our own conclusions. We don't need the truth being spun on us all the time. You know, we're intelligent enough to take the facts and draw our own conclusions. That's what I really like about this book, is it's the kind of honest reporting that that used to be more common in this country, and has really gotten out of hand now with the spinning of the truth all the time, and you know, propagandizing us on both sides. And so I wanted to share that with you, because it's full of information. It's fascinating, and it's reported in an incredibly balanced way that I rarely see. So I really enjoyed it, and I think it's good if you want to understand, you know, what are the pieces of the puzzle that have led us to where we are now. That's a great book. So I am going to bring this to a close now, and again, I appreciate you watching, and like I said, there's so much information. So I've got 2 more charts that will bring together that triangulation, the rule of 3 in astrology. That was part 1. And again, I want to re-emphasize that the most important part that I wanted you to see was the North Node is shifting into Donald Trump's 12th house on Election Day. That is so incredibly powerful. And when the polls close on election day, it's on the ascendant, which makes it even more powerful. There's an important story there that we are going to see in the other two charts as well. Okay, so I'm going to bring it to an end now. And thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate them. I really enjoy reading them. And I love building this community. And I hope you're enjoying it too. So thanks for watching, and I will be back soon. Bye-bye.